Let me tell you about State of Euphoria.
The 80s were a thriving time for the thrash genre. Classic after classic were dropped by so many bands, and one of my favorite bands within that style are New York juggernauts Anthrax. By the end of the decade, they had established themselves as one of the more unique bands in the scene by combining throttling musicianship with songwriting twists that lean more on inspiration from pop culture and a general sense of friendship and camaraderie in their delivery. As the decade began to wrap up and having just dropped their biggest record to date in 1987, Among the Living, the boys were wanting to carry that energy from their success into another follow-up almost immediately. Even with such a quick turnaround, though, they brought a product that was just as forward-thinking as releases from their contemporaries like Metallica, who were trying to adapt the sounds of thrash into something different. They snagged producer Mark Donson and pulled together a release that acts as a bridge in sounds and a proverbial send-off to the styles they had mastered on their previous works, and a record that, while not looked back upon quite as much as their prior, sits as my personal favorite in their catalog, and one that I see myself revisiting a lot as time goes on. Talking about their fourth album, State of Euphoria.
You know, it's funny. This album is unintentionally not too dissimilar from another record I've talked about in this segment, Dream Theater's Awake, which was a follow-up to their critically acclaimed, super heavily praised record, Images and Words, and State of Euphoria is the follow-up to the, again, super critically praised. A lot of people think it's Anthrax's best record, Among the Living. And while I love Among the Living, I think it is another top-tier Anthrax record. It is like top 3 favorites of the band's catalog to me personally. I find myself latching onto this record and wanting to talk about it today, not just because I think it's a classic like Among the Living, and it's my personal favorite above Among the Living because I like its production a little more. I feel like as time has gone on, while this album has its fans, it is not an album that a lot of people talk about or I see talked about in similar veins of like an Among the Living or even a Persistence of Time, the record that followed this. It's kind of the middle piece of that, which is upsetting because this record acts as sort of a ceremonial send-off to the Anthrax of the 80s while looking forward to new sounds and ideas and tones, you know. One of the things I do like about Among the Living that is different from this is the production. While Among the Living has this reverb-centric approach to production that creates this tonal atmosphere, Anthrax instead go for a beefier approach that I honestly think fits some of the songwriting and song ideas, like genre ideas that are on this project a little better, you know. On this record, they're sort of doing what Metallica did on Injustice for All, in that they're not writing just outright thrash songs. There's some songs with a thrashy element, like Make Me Laugh, some of the drums on Schism as well. They instead pair those with a more groove-centric approach, while also keeping the atmospheres and tone that were on Among the Living, that dark, sinister edge present on tracks like the opener Be All End All, which has these strings that sort of set this unnerving mood. That also carries into some of the riffs on Make Me Laugh, and Now It's Dark, and Misery Loves Company, which is a staple Anthrax song in my book, and it is similar to a lot of other Anthrax songs, and kind of what helps act as it reinforced that it's a send-off to 80s era Anthrax, and that it's a song about literature. You know, one of the things I love about Anthrax as a band is they always pull from other resources or pull from other inspiration from other art forms and make cool songs out of it, like I Am the Law. There's another track where they are inspired by another Stephen King book as well, and Misery Loves Company is inspired by Misery, the Stephen King book, and this also does songwriting-wise stuff that's similar to other Anthrax camps and pull from other things, like Now It's Dark being about Dennis Hopper's character for Blue Velvet being this sexual deviant, but they do it in a way that almost seems like it's in character of Dennis Hopper's character, and I really like that song as well. I love the pre-chorus of One Fucking Well-Dressed Man that just seems very in line with Anthrax's character as a band. And honestly, I just feel like there's other aspects that almost stand above Among the Living, and especially in Ordnance with that darker edge. I love the opener Be All End All. I love the foreboding tone it sets that lets the song kind of build slower into this nice groove that the band then throttles into the typical Anthrax sounds, and it deals with this sort of darker edge that feels like it's a little distant from the camaraderie sort of sounds that were on their earlier material. Again, they never strayed away from darkness and some unnerving ideas, but this record really seemingly focused more on that, and that's something I really enjoy. And like I said, one of the other aspects that I think is interesting and almost ahead of its time is the groove-centric stuff, like Add a Sign and a Mind, or Who Cares Wins, and the riff work on the cover of Antisocial that's on here. Very, again, seemingly ahead of its time in its structure, and I honestly really enjoy it. And I love that it also lets the drums, Charlie Benente's drums, travel in a different sort of way, and Charlie Benente's drums on here as a whole are the same standout that they are across Anthrax's other material, but it just feels different. It feels like, again, they're shifting into something else, because Persistence of Time, the follow-up to this, is a much more darker lyrical record, and this almost seems like a transition into toying with more ideas of that without losing some of the ideas that, or some of the types of writing Anthrax delved into in their earlier material, because you have other tracks like Who Cares Wins, which is about being homeless and dealing with that struggle, or the opener, Be All End All, being about anti-suicide. It's an anti-suicide song, but it's done in a way that's very unnerving and again, dark in its writing.
Or how Make Me Laugh really dives into evangelicalism and televangelism and how people can be fucked up and taken, advantage of the innocence of some people.
And I think they strike a really good balance on here of those classic Anthrax ideas. Other examples being the two closing songs, the interlude 13, which has these like tropical bells coming in here that kind of lead you really well into finale, which is this just big send-off. It's a big, vapid send-off stage setting closer that is a good job at, again, channeling classic Anthrax tonally. And I feel like it's those songs mixed with these new ideas and new production that make it my favorite Anthrax record, and one that I love coming back to. It's funny, I was looking into stuff, the legacy of this record, because I love to do that aspect of this, and the only thing I found was an interview from Charlie Benente, who talked about this experience, and he talked about how the band felt the same pressures that like Dream Theater felt on the creation of this record. They were following up this record that was huge for them, both from a production standpoint. They were working with a legendary producer who wanted to take their sound in an interesting direction, and they were following that up without him, and they wanted to seemingly capture something similar but of a different beast. It was kind of an album that he described as kind of a rush job, but I think that it doesn't really feel like that. I mean, I do think that this record does act as a sort of tonal shift, but they do it in a gradual way that I really enjoy. I think the only song that really kind of stemmed away from this in the general Anthrax oeuvre is Misery Loves Company. It's a song that I see people reference, or it's a song that people talk about with this, and it's because it's classic Anthrax. It's based in literature, and it's a great fucking tune. It's got a good hook. It's got really great verses that really feel tied to the subject matter in a similar way to what Anthrax just does best. And I can see why it gets the same praise and accolades all these years later, but I feel like a lot of this album, even their cover of Antisocial, which again, kind of a big thing. It was big in its time. I feel like as time has gone on, it's gotten kind of faded away, but it's a cover that I really enjoy and helps kind of continue the positive lyrics, even if it's in a dark overtone that the album tries to aim for in a couple of instances, but it's upsetting.
One little legacy tidbit I do have is that Now It's Dark was translated into Simlish and put inside of The Sims years ago, but that's about it.
And while there's not really much of a legacy to this record like some of the other albums that I've talked about, I still wanted to talk about it because it's my favorite Anthrax record and one that I feel like people really sleep on. And I hope that after hearing me talk about it and talk about what aspects I like, it does intrigue you. Because Anthrax are one of those bands that I really love. I love Anthrax as a whole. They're probably my second favorite out of the big four of thrash. And it's because their 80s run in particular was a great balance of jovial songs, dark shit, and a good sense of musicianship with some tight guitar work, incredible solo playing, and Charlie Benente's lively drum playing. I think he's one of the most underrated drummers in the genre, IMO. But yeah, that's my take on State of Euphoria. What did you think of this video? What do you think of this album? Do you like it? Do you like other Anthrax records more? Let me know in those comments down below. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Drop 6 to 7 vids a week on music, games, and general nerdery. It's a good time here. We have a good time on this channel. And if you like this, you'll probably like some of the other stuff I do. Special thanks to my patrons if you would like to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, and help drive the community. I've recently put up a couple polls on there about a new Let's Play I want to do in the next discography review. It's linked in the description. I'm going to be dropping the next reformatted discography review on there sometime this week, so be staying tuned for that. It won't hit the channel until December of this year, or maybe even next year. I don't know yet. But either way, I'm going to get out of here. I have been Foul Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.